Hi, Zipporah. It's so good to have you on this career break exchange session, Meet a Career Breaker. Really delighted to have you.
Thank you, Ofuswa. I'm glad to be able to share the story with the world.
Yes, with the world indeed. And for those who have just joined us and don't know what Career Break Exchange is, Career Break Exchange is a non-profit community. We aim to help people on any part of their career break journey, whether they're just plain curious or want to make a decision or actively planning or on a career break, want to get the most out of it, are returning from a career break, going back into work, or even considering going on a career break again. I think I picked that up from that last event. So we just want to provide enough information and enough stories. So we are really excited to have Zipporah on the call, talking about navigating new horizons and talk about a topic that I am personally intrigued about, global nomads. So, Zipporah, please tell us about yourself. Yeah, let's know about you and how did you even get into the whole global nomad bit? And please define it for us because some of us also are a bit green on what a global nomad is.
Okay, thank you for having me. Hello, audience. So my name is Barbara Zipporah Aiku. I am a former journalist. I started my career as a journalist and kind of went off into a business support role for quite a long time, for a number of years. And I've recently gotten back into communications and practicing corporate communication. So that's who I am. I have so many different interests as well. And I think maybe that's how come I've become a global nomad in the end, because as a child, I was also interested in fashion. I also used to sing. Um, so much. I don't want to start going into that, you know. But if to talk a little bit more about my journey to becoming a global nomad, it
Mhm.
actually happened through my first real job.
Mhm.
That's how it started. So after school, I worked in the media for about a year,
Okay.
and then my first job, personal assistant to a lawyer,
Mm.
and it happened to be a publisher as well. He used to attend a lot of conferences in the UK and in Europe. So since I was a PA, I got to travel with my employer.
Mm.
And so that's how it started. And 10 years later, I've got the opportunity to travel to 11 countries so far.
Wow.
And yes, and I took the opportunity to stay in different places for longer than the trip should have actually been. And
Hmm.
so that's how I define my global nomad. You mentioned about defining global nomad, and I think there's a generally accepted global nomad, definition. People who are able to live in any part of the country. Sorry, people who are able to live in any part of the world and
Hmm.
find a way to make a living through a lifestyle business or working remotely. But I really think that people should define it for themselves. If a
Hmm.
global nomad means are traveling to Africa alone, it's still within the world. And if
Hmm.
you're still able to through certain practice or activity, I think it should be accepted as well. So yes, that's a little bit about me.
Nice. So you've already shared with us your journey to becoming a global nomad and how it started and the number of countries you've been to. But can you expand it some more? So you were traveling with this your lawyer boss as a PA, probably got the excitement of going to different countries. And then from there, what happened and how, where was your first country? When did you make the decision? And because global nomads, depending on definition you're working with, normally go to a place and make a living. They don't always go with a job and source of financing in mind. They get there, they figure it out. And I think that's a brilliant thing about global. Oh my God, I know a global nomad. Can you imagine, guys? Tell us a bit more about your journey and how
Right.
a career break influenced it. Did you have the break in the time of being a nomad before? Like, just tell us a bit more.
Okay. So I first of all want to start by saying that as a child or as a teenager, I never dreamt about traveling. I never, aspired to it because I didn't have anybody in my family who traveled out of the country except one distant auntie who was always in Canada or Switzerland because she worked in diplomacy.
Mm,
It was never something I looked forward to. And I always find that so fascinating now, looking back, and I'm grateful for it as well. So my first country I traveled to was Burkina Faso.
mm,
And it's not a very exciting place for an African, right? Because when you talk about travel, global travel, people want to hear, oh, you've been to Europe or America or,
mm-hmm,
Asia. But that was my first location. That was my first destination. And I think that also is a reflection on humble beginnings. What if I did not accept that opportunity to
mm,
travel to Burkina Faso, which was also a work-related meeting? What if I hesitated from that opportunity? I probably wouldn't have made a positive impression on my employers, and they
mm,
would have maybe but then Burkina Faso, that was in 2013. That was
mm-hmm,
the first time I left Ghana. So on that trip, we flew to Tamale and then we got on a bus for about 10 extra hours to get to Ouagadougou. So that was very interesting. First time on the flight, first time on the flight, taking camera phones were not really a thing in
mm,
2013. They were available. I'm sure my phone could take pictures, but it was not the best of pictures. Um, yeah, so going to Burkina Faso for the first time, all I remember is it was very dusty. It was really dusty. It's in the northern part of West Africa. So um, but it was interesting to see different people, different languages. They speak French,
mm-hmm,
and it was so intriguing.
mm-hmm,
One thing that immediately we crossed the border from Wa, the
mm-hmm.
vegetation is different.
Oh,
Yes, and I found that really interesting because as we were crossing the border, there were trees, but we were still
mm-hmm,
in Ghana. But immediately we crossed, I realized, no, the trees look similar, but the leaves are different. And that was
oh,
very interesting. And I think that's one thing that travel really draws your attention on differences in some of the most, mundane things.
mm-hmm. Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So tell us also, I know you've gone on a career break before. What I want to now, I also understand that your traveling definitely happened before your career break. Is there a connection between when you went on a career break and when you decided to become a global nomad or even actually becoming a global nomad? Did you have that happen in between? Like, if you could just try and tell us,
Okay.
yes, at what point and how did it even influence your decision?
Right, that's a very interesting question. And I actually did not think about it in that way until you just asked that. So when I started working and got this opportunity in 2013,
Mm-hmm,
I had just completed a diploma in
mm-hmm,
communications. And my plan was to go back to school the following year. So work for like a year, go back to school. But through the work experience I had and through the first travel experiences that I had to Burkina Faso, and then the next country I went to was Nigeria,
mm-hmm,
I decided that, okay, I think I now want to take a gap year then. Yes. So a gap year is a sort of a break between usually students in Europe or America would take a gap year after high school
Mm-hmm.
and before university. I had already gone to some sort of higher education. It was a
Mm-hmm.
diploma, but why go to school? Why go back to school right now? Why don't
Immediately.
you take a year off and then go back to school later on? Which my parents were very much not happy to hear
I can
that.
imagine because when you even said gap year, I'm like, are you Ghanaian? Then I'm like, what about your parents? So this is a response that is familiar. I don't think my parents would have been like, what are you sitting at home for?
Yeah, yes. So around the time I got exposed to the idea of a gap year, it was in 2014, and I had been to Europe, I have been to Portugal, I had been to the UK, and had been to the US.
Wow.
So I've
All in that
been
year.
very,
From
yes,
Burkina Faso, Nigeria. Okay.
in 1 year I had done that. And so when I got exposed to the idea of a gap year, then I had a conversation with my employer that I wanted to return to the US for some time.
Okay.
And he supported the idea. So my role shifted into sort of a virtual assistant role.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
that's that. Yes. So I ended up going to New York in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
November 2014. I always remember all my travel dates because they're so special. Yes. So I stayed in the US for 6 months at first. Yes, I stayed in the US for 6 months. So luckily, I had aunties that I discovered. You know how your mom has this, maybe your mom has this cousin, you know?
Somewhere.
Yes. So when my mom got to know, okay, I'm now going to, she was like, okay, so I have these cousins who live in New York and they can be the people who can, because, in Ghana at 24 or 23, then you're still seen as
A child.
you need,
You need
yes,
to be taken care
one
of.
thing. Yeah, you're still seen as because my parents were so worried. What do you mean you're going to the US for 6 months? They were pretty devastated, even though I thought they should be excited.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I went to stay with my aunties at first. It was a warm welcome. I think that really played a huge role in
Mm.
me feeling in a new place, in a new
Mm.
country. So I did stay in the US for 6 months and I was able to discover some gigs to supplement my income
Oh,
from being a
nice.
virtual assistant. Yes. Yes. So I babysat, I worked as a PA to a real estate agent in
Mm-hmm.
the US for those 6 months. So that was the first long trip I ever took from Ghana. And I came back to Ghana after 6 months and returned a month later.
Okay, back to the US.
Yes, for
Okay.
another six.
Oh,
So it ended
wow.
up being a year of babysitting, virtual assistant, and being a PA to a real estate agent. So that was my first experience dipping my toe into the global nomad life.
Wow. And after that, maybe briefly tell us how many other countries did you go to and what kind of jobs did you do to, should I say, feed yourself whilst you were away from home, um, which is in Ghana?
Right. So I have been to 11 countries in total.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that, I would say I have stayed at least a month in 9 of those countries.
Okay.
So Burkina Faso and Nigeria are the only 2 countries I've not returned to or did not stay for long. Those
Okay.
were a week, 2 weeks maximum.
Mm-hmm.
But in Europe, I've been to 5 countries: Italy, Netherlands, Germany, Hungary, and Switzerland. I stayed in each for a month at a time in on one trip. So I went on a trip and I stayed here for a month and then moved on. Um,
Oh,
and the yes. The interesting thing about it is that all through all these travels,
Mm-hmm.
I still held that personal assistant role.
Mm.
Yeah, so
Mm.
there were some nuances to that job that made that possible.
Mm.
Uh, my employer was a lawyer. Later on, his role also transitioned into other things, which I may not be able to mention on this podcast, but
Mm-hmm.
that allowed to travel and still work with him via the phone, the laptop, sending emails. So I've always had that foundation. I think
Mm-hmm.
that should be very clear because people need to find a way to relate to what I'm saying. That had that foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from time to time on my travels, I would bring certain things back home to sell. Like I
Mm.
have brought a ladies' clothing, especially jeans, because I feel jeans were versatile, universal. Everybody wears jeans.
Mm.
So on my trips, I've come back with one suitcase of just jeans in different sizes
Mm-hmm.
um, to sell to store owners. So selling them in wholesale. And
Okay.
then from time to time, if I get the opportunity, I'll sell it one-on-one as well.
Oh, wow.
So yes.
I love how you being a global nomad, you taking the break, the gap year was also supported by your employer at the time. And I can clearly see how he was instrumental in all of this because kind of gave you the opportunity and the freedom to sort of let me do this versus, oh, how am I going to survive? At least you had this job that allowed you, and then you could add others that supplemented it. And even when you came to Ghana, you didn't come back, should I say, broke? You came back with stuff to even sustain you whilst you're here before you move back on. So 11 countries, only two, you haven't stayed for more than a month. And each time you went somewhere, you got something to do and a way to fend for yourself. So this is amazing. Honestly speaking, this is I've read about global nomads. Now I've met one and just spoiler
Yes.
alert, I don't know the full story. So I'm discovering a lot myself on this call. So this is amazing. Tell us, you've been to so many countries. Tell us about adapting to the culture. Um, even though you and adapting to the culture, the different time zones, and how you've spoken a bit about communication and productivity, the laptop that you had from your employers. But how did you maintain productivity and communication when your surroundings are constantly changing? And let me just say, I noticed you barely went to English speaking countries. So like, yo, tell us about the language as well and how you're able to manage. So culture, language, and just the changing environment. And how did you cope with comms and just being productive?
Right. Okay. So in terms of adapting to new environments, so with the USA example, because that's the first time I stayed out of Ghana for that long. In the US, I was often mistaken for an African American because African American, especially in New York, in the
Mhm.
city, African Americans are all over the place. So that was not much of a problem. And I also spoke English and good English because I was a journalist. So I often had the experience. This is not the, I'm not answering the question, but I often had the experience. People would bump into me or meet me at an event and be surprised that, oh, you come from Ghana. And
Mhm.
how come you so good English? How come you speak good English? And that makes you realize that people don't really know much about African
Yeah.
countries or outside of their
Mhm.
area, and Americans especially I know not to travel out a lot. So I think it's about approaching people with that open-mindedness because you could, let's say, get upset that someone asks you, how comes you speak good English? But with time, I had to understand that it was an
They don't know.
opportunity. Yes, it was an opportunity to just explain yourself and teach people about your culture or where you come
Mm.
from. In the US, I faced issues with the time zone because usually the US is 4 to 5 hours difference to Ghana. And I am naturally an early bird. So yes, I sleep usually by 8 p.m., 9 p.m. I'm in bed, irrespective of where I am in the world.
Oh,
And
wow.
then I'm 4 a.m. So um adjusting to work, I missed a lot of early calls from Ghana
Mm,
because but Ghanaians are up, we are still sleeping. But my boss understood. And I would say it was also in a season of the business where things were not as productive, especially for
okay.
the US. So I was able to get away with a lot of that and just producing documents that I've been asked to edit or go through and submitting them later, and maybe having a conversation on a Thursday afternoon to um, discuss what's on the table.
Mm,
For Europe, there was not much challenges with the time zone because it's usually we're around an hour or two difference, or sometimes we're on the same time zone for the UK.
mm-hmm.
Um, so, but in Europe, the language was the main thing because yeah, in Italy, Italy is my most traveled country.
Okay.
Um, yes, I've done return trips in different parts of Italy. I think 6 trips at the
Wow.
moment. Yes.
Can
We
I ask
had,
before you continue,
yes,
do you know how many trips you've done?
so I've lost count.
Ah!
I have, I
Have you
tried to.
have you done more than 30? Do
So
you
I
know if
see,
you've done more than 20?
I see it this way. I've been to 11 countries.
Okay.
And out of it, I have repeated about half of them.
Yo, and you've already been to Italy
Uh,
6 times. Okay, let's stop
and
counting now.
I
But
have
please
lost.
continue. You're talking about
Yes,
the culture and the language. You're on the language. Can't wait to hear the bit about the culture too.
right. So for language, I don't think I'm the best when it comes to languages, unfortunately. I took French in high school, like everyone, but I've forgotten all of it. In junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Italy. But I think especially European languages are quite similar to English.
Okay.
Most of the are similar. So, for example, if you see like a road sign, not even road signs are symbols, but maybe a writing, let's say on a
Mm-hmm.
billboard. If you pay attention, you kind of be able to understand what they're
Okay.
trying to say. And also, now we have Google Translate. So I use Google Translate a lot on the
A lot.
trips. Yes. So Google Translate even allows people to record what the
Mm-hmm.
person is speaking to you. So I think now it's easier, but earlier on, even though maybe Google Translate was available, we didn't know to use it.
Okay.
Right. So language, I've not been able to learn Italian or German or Hungarian. Dutch, oh my God, no. In Switzerland, they speak French and German as well. But usually, yes,
So you were communicating in English.
yes,
Oh, wow.
yes. So usually in most cities and the towns,
Mm-hmm.
most people speak some English.
English as second language. Mm.
Really small towns and the villages. And I had that experience in Italy. In Italy, we're usually in smaller towns, not in the cities.
Okay.
And for there, you need your Google Translate, or you have to do a lot of sign languages for people to understand what you're saying.
Oh wow, this is amazing. So we'll be going on a break soon. You've talked about language, but tell us about the culture. I mean, when you were talking about Google Translate, I was getting goosebumps because I remember when I grew up in Kumasi and moved to Accra, and I didn't know anywhere, and I was given a company car, and I didn't know how to go. So Google Maps was like my savior. You cannot badmouth Google Maps to me. Like, there's no way because helped me navigate, keep my job, well, partly, because I could get to places without asking for direction all the time. So I can understand how Google Translate also was your friend. But tell us about
Right.
the culture, the different nuances, and how you were able to adapt before we go on a break.
Right. So I think I don't know about others, but I think it's a common perception that America or Europe or the UK, they do not have any culture because we Africans think we have culture. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, we have the traditions. We have they are just there wearing trousers and t-shirts. Like
Not true. Every
that's
every
not true at all.
people have a culture. And in the US, I always go back to that because that's the first experience. So it was a lot of culture shocks and all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
for example, US, the idea of high context and low context society. So people don't just say things. If you see a baby, a mother carrying a baby, like, and you think that that's a girl, you go, oh, that's a really cute baby girl.
Mm-hmm.
For all you know, that mother could be, that child could be a boy.
Okay.
You know, in Ghana, people will not really take that personally. That
Yeah.
baby could be, or that baby could belong to a parent or a family who believes in, excuse me to say, um,
Different genders and
and
wow.
so they get offended. So that was
Wow.
one thing, especially in the US, that you have to really watch what you say. Like in Ghana, people will say, "Oh, you've put on some weight." Your friend would just say that casually. In the US, yeah, there are terms you have to use, even with your friends, even with people you work with, and all of that. And also, of course, I think as Africans, one thing that always comes up with regard to travel is racial discrimination.
Okay.
Um, that definitely came up for me in Europe and in the US. But
Mm.
in the US, first time that I realized that I was Black. You know, in Ghana, when you are brought up in Ghana, you live at home, you know that you are a human being, period. You know?
Yes.
Period.
The best you
Fact.
get is maybe you're from a different tribe.
Yes, just
Everybody
that.
is black.
Yes, but when I got to the US, I was okay. So there is the brown paper, um, the paper bag test, you
Mm.
know, lighter or darker than a paper bag. That determines how you might be treated, based on where you found yourselves in. In one of the homes that I worked in, it was in a very white neighborhood, and usually, where I worked as a babysitter,
Mm-hmm.
usually old parties of up to 50 people attending, and I'll be the only African there.
Wow.
So you get the stares, you get the questioning looks, like what's she doing here, that kind of thing. But I think all these things really build my character, my confidence, um, and it's an amazing experience.
Wow. Wow. You've
Yeah.
talked about language, you've talked about culture, you've talked about even some of the challenges and how it is built character and even the stairs. I've experienced being black in a white environment. So and I've even experienced being black in a black and white environment, but then people also didn't want to accept you for the black you were. You either black from that country or black from somewhere else.
Oh,
So
yes.
yeah, I can relate with what you're saying. And for those considering being a global nomad, considering going on a career break that would lead to that, I think Zipporah has given us some information around that. So we'll go on a break. We can't wait to come back and unpack the story a bit more. So we'll see you soon. Hi, we're back from the break. Wow, Zipporah, this is one of the best expression interesting. So You've talked about the language, the culture, what started it, the gap year, the Burkina Faso trip. Wow, wow, wow. That's a lot to take in, but I know there's more. So tell us, when it comes to having been a global nomad, how has it shaped your professional growth? What are some of the opportunities and challenges you overcame? And also knowing that you took not just a gap year, you took another career break during this time. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Right. So I think that these travel experiences and having been on a career break has rather shaped my perspective on work-life balance. And I would like to use the term unprofessional growth rather than professional growth.
Tell us more. Tell us more.
Yeah, yeah, because I think also as a creative person, um, I've always been thinking about ways to live a free life, to have freedom, financial freedom, creative expression. Because I sing, I know how to sew and design, even though I love designing more. So through these travel experiences, I have met people who are living this life that I aspire to, that makes me feel that it's possible. And I've also seen people who are combining the two.
Mm,
Someone who is selling in the corporate world and also is very creative when they get the chance to. So yes, that's my perception about how this travel experience has shaped my perception on professional growth. I think it's more not just thinking about professional growth, but more about life in general,
mm-hmm,
having that broad bird, bird's eye view on life that um, I can be a communications expert. I'm thinking of going to academia. I can be a communications lecturer and still travel the world and still sew on the weekends and
mm.
at jazz club on Sunday nights.
I love what you said because it reminds me of the term in Akan, to like travel and see. It's open your eyes to what is possible. I'm sure you may have met someone in Ghana, but I think your tendency to have meet people who were living this life that you aspire to, really is because you took the chance on becoming a global nomad. Tell us a bit
Yes.
more too about the most recent career break, how it impacted you being a global nomad, and why should anybody bother with a career break from your experience? Yeah.
Yes. Really looking forward to this aspect of the discussion because it's a podcast, right? So someone would have thought that with all these travels over the years and having such a flexible job and having the opportunity to delve into other things, why would I need another career break? You know, you always take breaks anyways, but at the beginning of 2022,
Hmm.
I decided to take a break. In fact, I decided in December 2021.
Hmm.
Um, and this break was triggered by feeling burnt out from
Mm.
um, over the years, aside traveling, working as a personal assistant, sometimes virtual assistant when I'm out of the country, trying to run businesses on the side, bringing clothing, women's makeup. And then I started a real estate agency. Remember, I worked
Wow.
with a real agent in the US.
Hmm.
My father was a real estate developer. So I think that inspired me to see that, oh, you were a lady, but you can also work in real estate. And so I started a real estate agency in 2017,
Okay.
where I rent and buy homes in Accra. So by the end of 2021, I was just tired because it's like
Exhausted. You were done.
I was more than. And if you know anything about real estate, you could show about 15 properties in a month and end up with one and a half deal. You know? Yeah, so January 2022, I set out to take a 3-month break. It was supposed to be a 3-month break,
It
just to
was
rest.
supposed to be this is getting interesting. We're having a lot of people on the show. So it was supposed to be, and then okay, to tell us where yours landed.
Right. It was supposed to be a 3-month break. It ended up being a 2-year break. Yes.
How did
Breaks
you
are my
afford it?
That's the question I always get. I had investments,
Hmm.
both um financial investments and people. I had people. I had a support system as well.
Hmm.
Have to be
Hmm.
about that. But yeah, because there are concerns in adult life, I thought just a 3-month break will be good. I'll feel refreshed and then come back to work and, grind.
Mm-hmm.
So by the third month, I actually realized that, oh, this has coincided with me planning to go back to school to study a top-up degree in
Okay.
communications.
Okay.
So I started a course, which was a weekend attendance.
Okay.
Um, but with time, I thought that I would love to study full time
Mm-hmm.
instead of going to work on the weekdays and studying on the weekends. I really wanted that to be the only thing I was doing at the moment.
Okay.
Yes, and the course at 2 years. So
Oh
um
wow.
that being free on the weekdays, attending lectures on the weekends and studying in between as and when as I could. And I did some more traveling as well. In the past 2 years, I did more of Italy and I did 6 months in the UK.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I have just returned from the UK in March after staying there for 6 months. So that was really interesting. I'd only done a month, 2 weeks, a few weeks in the UK as and when, but this time
Mm-hmm.
I was in for 6 months over winter.
In Scotland. Okay.
Yes.
I'll
So that
just leave our listeners to Google that if they already don't
oh
know what winter in Scotland
cold,
is.
cold. Let me give you a hint. It's freezing.
It's crazy. You are living in a freezer constantly, constantly.
Oh,
Oh, interesting. Wow.
yes.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. So not only wow. So I think the decision to even extend the break is interesting. I don't know if we have enough time to go into that, but that was a bold decision to just go like, no, I will continue this, but not work. And then also travel a lot more. So that's a very interesting career break that you had. Some people go to career break and travel, some people go to school. You had traveling, schooling, and just deciding that, you know what, I'm not going to do 3 months. I'm going to do the full 2 years. I'm going to find ways to fund it. That is very but what would you say has been your biggest opportunity with this recent career break, come traveling, come global nomad too as well, and um, how 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 has it actually shaped you?
Right. So, first of all, deciding to go back to university at 30 something was a big decision. I was in lectures with a lot of 19 and 20-year-olds. So
Well, outlook
that
on
was
life was different then, so I can only imagine.
exactly so that was a big decision. I didn't think that I would go back to university because with the path that I was on, already having an okay job traveling around, I thought I would just veer into entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
And I really believe in self-learning and exploring yourself. But I decided that it's better to have the qualifications and not need it
Hmm.
than need to have it. So that was interesting. I think that my biggest opportunity as far as the recent career break is concerned is it was also a sort of a spiritual,
Mm,
if I should say, because one of the things I was not very excited about my real estate work is that I was so passionate about it. I was not necessarily making successes or having big
mhm.
deals, but I pushing at it because I really love real estate. I grew
Okay.
up living in different houses with my parents because my dad will build a house, sell it, and then we move into another house.
Mm,
So, it was interesting to me, but I had to sit back and decide that I don't have to follow what I think my parents did just because, I'm passionate about it. Because on paper, I was making losses,
mm,
running with my truck. And so it was a spiritual decision in the sense of I said to myself and to my God or the universe, whatever, whoever believes in, that I think that I deserve to work in a business that actually makes profit. And so I'm
mm,
gonna stop this.
mm,
That's like a protest because
mm,
I want to be valuable. So taking the break for 2 years was sort of a journey of trusting God and
mm,
uh, being open to new opportunities
mm.
and saying no to something that I really want to do, but on paper it's not making sense. So yes, there was
Wow.
a lot. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. For me, this is almost always a epiphany moment for me when people go like something was just off. And I decided to take that break to kind of figure it out. And this is the first time I'm hearing someone saying I was good at something. I loved it, but I wasn't making money. So this was my sign to go like, stop this and figure it out. And that's how this whole break became a spiritual awakening for you. And congrats. I mean, I think I've heard you talk about the break a little differently, and hearing this side too is amazing. Congrats on being bold enough to go like something is wrong. Let me take a step back and do it. So for
Thank you.
those who want to be a global nomad, and I think this particular discussion really is also about your life as a global nomad, intertwined with your career break experiences. First was a gap year, then it was a point like, I'm tired, but I also need to figure this out. My business want to go to school. Whoosh, you have a lot of layers, Zipporah. Very interesting. But if somebody wants to prep to be a global nomad, obviously their journey may not be like yours, but knowing what you know now about being a global nomad, knowing what you know now about how career breaks even influenced you being a global nomad, um, what would be some of the practical things people should really look out for? What should they do? How should they prepare mentally for the culture language shock? What top five advice from Zipporah on being a global nomad? Let's call that let's call this section that. But yeah, what's your we can't run through everything, but honestly, big thing.
Yeah,
Nobody should forget this if they're going to be a global nomad.
I should say that a lot of friends or people who know me and know that I travel around a lot tend to ask me, oh, what to do. I'm traveling, trying to go on
Mm,
a trip. And I would say that I think this is so cliche, but never despise your small beginnings. I told them take a trip into somewhere in
Burkina
Africa,
Faso.
take a trip to Nigeria because you're building muscle, you're building experience. I'm
Mm,
saying, what if I did not accept the opportunity to go to Burkina Faso and Nigeria? Those were the first two trips that I ever went on. Probably I would have been tagged as someone who's not adventurous or not
mhm.
confident to go on. So that's one thing, explore, because I know a lot of Africans want to travel, but they want to go to Europe.
Yeah.
And time to go into this, maybe on another podcast discussion. But actually, I'm now also exploring traveling into Africa more.
Mm,
Yes, as a way of connecting with my roots and
mm,
ancestors. Because as a traveler, I should not be biased and say I'm only going to Europe and America. There's
mm,
so much as well. But I think it's really about staying open, learning.
mhm,
I learn a lot I was not really into books until most recently, but I read a lot on the internet.
Okay.
Um, because when you go into a new place, you may come with your own biases and, ideologies, but you should understand that they are also living in their own civilization and they're also doing things that works for them. And we hear a lot of news about racism and then, attacks even recently in the UK,
Mhm.
this news around that, but it's not everyone really. I would say that bad news travels
Fast.
faster, but there are so many good people all over the world, and you should never be afraid to travel somewhere. For the last thing I want to add is that you should be able to embrace some chaos,
I'm
because
chaos.
yeah, discomfort and because I was comfortable in Ghana. The first
Mhm.
time I went to US, I was living in a room that's like a quarter size of my bedroom in Ghana. You know, yeah, exactly.
Not your house, your bedroom. Okay. Let's keep on with the chaos.
So be comfortable with discomfort.
Mm,
And because of my lifestyle, I've had to move up to 10 times since 2016 in Accra. Yes, because I sort of merged the travel lifestyle, the nomad lifestyle with getting rid of things when I don't need them. So I've not had a
mm,
stable place for so long.
mm.
Sometimes I've had, in quotes, homelessness, in the middle because maybe I've just come from a trip. I'm planning another trip, but I don't have a place. So I may be staying with a friend
Mm.
for some. Because if I also want to go rent a new place before my
That's the
next trip,
whole.
adapt. So make it work for yourself, depending on your own story. My own story is different. And yes, I think that money is an issue, especially in Ghana. People talk a lot about how can people afford it. But I
Mhm,
think we have people who are really hung up on lifestyle because
mhm.
some of them travel, but they are driving a Porsche car.
Yeah.
I've never driven a Porsche car, but I have Porsche travels. So it's about what is your priority.
Hmm.
Right now, if somebody gives me $100,000, I will not go and buy a new car or pay a deposit for a mortgage. I would prefer to travel because that's my priority.
Mm,
So
mm,
it's about what's important to you. If really you want to go on a career break, if really you want to be a nomad, you should be able to sit down and calculate and decide. So that's the little I can say.
Wow, I've picked so much already. I should have written them down. I was playing them back in my head. But you talked about one, priorities. Let's maybe start from the back. Priorities, and that informs how you calculate for your career break. If
Yeah.
global nomadcy is really what you want, then when you get that 100K or you save up, you know how to prioritize. You may not buy the latest iPhone or Apple device or Samsung, whatever. I'm not good at devices, so I'm throwing the words around. To be willing to be uncomfortable. And with the whole global normalcy thing you mentioned, like rent in Ghana, a lot of people would say at least a year. Nobody really takes a month. So you have to get used to staying with a friend, using their blender, and going to your parents' house and come home by this time. You also mentioned be open because we are living here in Ghana, at least currently we both are, wherever you are in the world, if you go to another place, they are also living there with their own lifestyle. So be open to, and remember, bad news travels fast. So the bad news you've heard is not the only news. There's also good news wherever you go, and don't be afraid. That's another one. Don't be afraid. I think that's one thing that will be a big thing. Even people want to go on career break, there's a fear barrier you need to get through, let alone become a global nomad or go on a career break to become a global nomad. I mean, whichever way you look at it, you had different experiences. And then you also talked about keep learning, whether it's book, whether it's online, whether Google is your friend, keep learning because you need it. Um,
Yes.
And then the one that you said at the very beginning really struck me, and now it's like an epiphany, it's gone. Um,
Ooh, which one was that?
oh, don't despise humble beginnings.
Oh,
Start by
yes.
traveling somewhere. Yes, 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 yes. That really sunk in for me. And then like, why did I forget? Next, I'm taking my notebook. I'm not gonna try and do this.
I also
So travel
like hope.
somewhere. Go cross the border and go to Togo. Go to Ivory Coast. Go to Burkina Faso. Wherever you are, look at the borders around. Or if you're like some of the people I know, move from the city you are and go and live a few months in another city in Ghana because it's very different. I grew up in Kumasi. I live in Accra now. There's a lot of differences. I keep talking about it. So don't despise the small beginnings because it helps you build muscle. You did Burkina Faso, Nigeria, then some other countries. Then you have the thing to do the gap year in the US. Now you've done UK, you've done Hungary. Like build that muscle. Don't go to the Olympics, go carry weights when you've never even held a dumbbell. So thank you so much, Zipporah. This has been amazing. Um, it definitely insightful. I feel we've just scratched the surface on everything, but we want to be also mindful that people would love to listen to this within a period. If there's one thing, you said so much, but if there's one thing you want people to remember, just one thing. I know it's a hard question, but what would that be?
Yes. Oh God, what should I say? I think that travel is the greatest gift in the world, honestly. I think that everyone should. I feel that most people who are already on this podcast or on this YouTube channel are already interested in travel. But just in case there's someone listening who's not really interested in travel, I have not met someone who's traveled and, not enjoyed it or say I don't like traveling. So I think that it should be a priority. Everyone should go somewhere. I think it even helps us to appreciate the world more, God more. And so travel somewhere, travel somewhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Zipporah. This has been Career Break Exchange. We are a non-profit community. We try and give people resources, information, and interviews like this with Zipporah to help you on your career break journey, whether you're just curious, whether you want to decide to go on one, whether you're actively planning, whether you're on one, and want to enjoy it better or make the most out of it, or returning from one, or like Zipporah going again.
Yeah.
We hope to give you enough information. I hope you would also take what Zipporah has said, travel. Just make that effort to travel. We are so glad to have had you, Zipporah. Thank you so much for making the time. Thank you for introducing some of us who may not know or didn't know about the world of being a global nomad and how it intertwined with you going on career breaks twice. So really,
Yeah.
really happy about it. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you again.
I
Um,
really I'll be back soon. Thank you so much.
back very soon. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.